Hey, Billy.
Hey, Peter Rowan, how you doing, man?
I'm all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
How how's it over there in Nashville? Everything shut down?
I've been cruising around town a little bit, just going
Yeah,
for drives and stuff, and I see people out at restaurants and
yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
I see. Yeah. What about recording studios?
I'm not sure. I think that's probably okay. I mean, if you're isolated in your own booth and stuff like that, I mean, you could figure out how to do that safely, I think.
So the studios are open?
I'm not sure if they're open. I did hear about one session that's happening at the beginning of next month
Cool.
at the butcher shop.
Oh yeah, who's going to do that?
I can't say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was that's where we were going to go in, but yeah.
Yeah, man, I was really looking forward to that. That was right before all this stuff happened that we were talking about going in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been working on some tunes?
Yeah. Yeah. I've sort of changed my I mean, I had this, to follow up the album I did, Carter Stanley's Eyes. I I've got a different focus on this one, but as soon as this thing started to hit, and everything began to shut down, it just changed my idea of uh, what I want to be subjects. I mean, it just sort of kind of pushed me in a little deeper and bringing in some tunes from outside that I hadn't thought of in a while, but they're really classic tunes of our, you know, of our great songbook of popular music and bluegrass.
Yeah. Oh man,
I mean,
that's
I know that Rebel would be happy with, you know, just some good, solid, just straight bluegrass. But we're being called upon to deliver something a little more. I think
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
my idea.
Yeah,
So
and for me it's always interesting to try to get those kind of ideas and that kind of subject matter to come across in a song that is kind of a bluegrass structure. Or I got this song that's like almost like an old moonshiner tale or something, except it's methamphetamine that you know
oh,
is the issue. So it's like more of a modern epidemic, but like in I'm saying all the same old shit. If I would have listened to what mom and dad said, I wouldn't have been here today. And they call
right.
they call me by a number, not a name, and all this. And um,
Well, you got to do it. You got to talk about what's going on.
yeah,
I mean, bluegrass has been for too long been a kind of a hiding place for you know. Um, it's been self quarantined for too long.
yeah, I hear you.
you know.
So,
But yeah,
where are you hiding out? Are you in California or where are you at?
I'm in California.
Yeah.
A little place called Tennessee Valley. Funny enough, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge on the road out to the coast. Just happened to end up here. Um, my next door neighbor is Maria Maldor, and it's kind of
Hmm.
a little bit of a last of the last holdouts from the ancient times.
Yeah, man. Well, good to hear from you, and I'm glad you're doing well, and it's good to talk to you, man. I've been listening to a lot of stuff. One of my go-tos is that Dustbowl Children, that quartet record that you guys did. It was so is in that song in particular. It just gives me goosebumps and makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up and all sorts of stuff. And I just love how that thing, like the groove and the
Yeah,
you know
it was when I wasn't playing bluegrass that song. Well, it was just after "Old in the Way," and "High Lonesome Sound" was one of the "Old in the Way" tunes,
hmm,
and but the Dust Bowl Children was, it's kind of a grassy tune, and I wrote it down in L.A. when I was recording with my brothers Chris and Lauren, we were at a American Recorder Studios where Richie Podler, who produced Three Dog Night, that was his studio, and it we had been out to the Palomino after the session the night before, and the Palomino was a famous, you know, country nightclub, right? Dwight Yoakam and the Dillards and everybody would be sort of going out there. It was sort of a Merle Haggard's hangout too in those days. And we'd been out there that night, and there's a fabulous country music radio station in LA at the time, very famous, and I don't remember anything about it except that you could turn it on in the morning and get all the great honky tonk, because so many well, I guess you call them Okies, so many folks had come out there during the Great Depression, including the Rose Maddox and her brothers. They had come out from Alabama, and they started out living in a culvert over where what became Culver City. But the culvert was a irrigation project, right? You know, one of those big pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And Rose Maddox and her brothers were living there, and so this whole migration to California from the South and the Texas from the West had started after the Great Depression. You know, nobody had any work anyway, and California was the golden dream, as Woody Guthrie said, right?
Yeah.
But if you ain't got the do re mi, you know, you better go back to Texas or Alabama, sunny Tennessee, you know. And so consequently, there was so much country music around that time. Even I mean, Clarence White was playing during that time.
Yeah.
And he, I guess at that moment had, oh no, he had met the unfortunate end there, because we had just made Mule Skinner a couple of years before. So this had been like 1973, 74, 75 in that time period. And so there was this sort of, not that LA had the vibe of being a country music town, but the musical, I mean, there's lots of music in LA, but the musical sort of vibe that was going on with the people, you know, because they're like bluegrass folks, country music folks, pretty much devoted to love the style. And so you could turn on the radio in the morning and you could get a real dose of Buck Owens and all kinds of great honky tonk music. And so Dustbowl Children came out of just being in LA recording. We were down there for a month because we had to alternate days with Three Dog Night over at Richie Podler's studio. And Billy Ray Latham hung out there a lot. Billy got to be friends with Richie Podler. And it just, like, I woke up in the morning, I had a radio, or there was a radio in the motel room, and it was you know, Hollywood City. I mean, it was not Hollywood Boulevard over there. It was on the other side of the ridge out towards the old orange groves and everything. American Recorders, it was called. And so you got this real country music station going on. I remember waking up in the morning, you know, after being out, just having a session and then going out and hearing some music. And there it was, you know, and it just Dustbowl Children seemed to be the story that was being told. So I wrote the song at that point. It just, it was sort of natural, you know, and I realized I never really tried to get away from, you know, bluegrass per se. It's just that at a certain point, you know, it was very hard to make a living in bluegrass unless I think you were like, you know, living up in the Baltimore, Washington area and playing just the local gigs as time went on and kind of building that way. I remember because I'd been taught to write a letter of application, you know, when I went to school. This is how you write a business letter. So I typed out these letters and sent them to every record company in Nashville. And they were like, we really like bluegrass and we think you've done great work with Bill. But, you know, we're just not going to be putting out bluegrass right now. And so like, where do you go, right? So
Yeah.
ultimately, Dave Grisman and I formed Earth Opera, but bluegrass was always it was always in there. I mean, and the good thing about bluegrass, as you know, is that it's musically speaking, it's a kind of a code. It's a kind of a code, and you can do a lot with it for what it is.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and of course nowadays, with the advent of the internet and all this kind of broadcasting tools that are out there now. I mean, gosh, there's all kinds of stuff that's bluegrass and sort of bluegrass, and you know,
Yeah.
and so you have this, you know, if you want to go traditional, or if you want to, you know, you got a lot of choices these days.
I feel like it kind of just depends on the kind of person you are. Like, for instance, if you were, maybe if you grew up out west where, there was a lot of hippies and stuff like that, you might lean more towards that sort of more relaxed.
Well, I listened to all that stuff that came out of LA in the 60s. It's all very mid-tempo,
Yeah.
kind of grooving,
Right.
kind of, I guess, Michael West Coast grooving. It was very mid-tempo, a lot of cross picking, with the Byrds and people like that.
Yeah.
And of course, once Clarence got in there, it just changed the game. Um, I lived close to some Gene Parsons, and Gene was Clarence's partner in the band Nashville West that got going after he left the Byrds, after Clarence left the Byrds.
Hmm.
And Gene has a lot of stories, and he and another partner up there in Mendocino, which is about 3 or 4 hours up the coast from here, on the West Coast. Uh, they've been making you know, uh, the Clarence string bender guitars
Yeah.
for years, and so Clarence, I think, was the real link between bluegrass sensibility and the link to popular music.
Yeah, man. I think you're right.
You know,
That's a good point.
it, yeah. So I mean, it's pretty exciting when you think of we're part of his legacy.
Oh yeah.
Especially you. Especially you, because you play a lot of lead guitar.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
man, he was such a great player. I love listening to that Mule Skinner stuff and just man, it must have been so great to play with him. He had such a I love how he could just lay on the back of the beat and stuff and just be slinky about it.
Yeah, he's very understated, really.
Yeah,
I guess
incredible.
you could say. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was kind of shy. I mean, that lick in the beginning of Mule Skinner, which is what I sort of learned that from Charlie Waller. That was my interpretation of Charlie's lick in Mule Skinner. He played that, and and I said, "Can you play this?" I said to Clarence, I said, "Well, play," and he said, "No, man, you play it." And I'm like, I was such a coward. I mean, it was like, me play it on acoustic guitar, right? And I said, it would be great if you played it on electric, and and he did, of
Oh
course, and
wow.
then fantastic sound.
Oh man. I
Yeah.
think you're a fantastic guitar player, Peter. There's a
Well,
I really
thank you.
do, man. There's this one song that I really have fallen in love with. My bass player Royal, he showed it to me. He just sent me a YouTube video one time, and I've never heard this song. Let me I'll play a little lick of it for you and see if you can recognize it. This one here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I know that song. Baby, I'm gone. And,
Yeah.
and and I wrote that over there on Harvard Avenue. I rented Ranger Doug's house, and my son Michael was about 4 years old, and that was the last. Was it the last place we lived in Nashville? No, then we lived after that back over in the Green Hills. But that was nice by the railroad tracks over there in Harvard Avenue, and you'd watch these guys who rode the trains walking right down Harvard Avenue. They get off. The train would stop out there for some reason before it got to downtown, and all the hobos would get off there because they wouldn't get searched. And you'd see these guys. You know, Nashville has been a hotbed of homeless people for many, many years.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is anymore, but I mean, I remember going into the post office, which was open 24 hours a day. I went into the post office one Christmas Eve to pick up my mail. We're living out on Hillsborough Avenue. And I went in there, man, and I had to step over people sleeping in the post office in Nashville, Tennessee at that time.
Oh wow.
I mean, it was like a community. And in fact, I used to make a point of talking to these folks and going out to the honky tonks that they hung out at, which was a completely different scene, you know? I mean, it's like, it wasn't like slumming, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, songwriters visiting the poor folks. It wasn't like that. It was just a separate world,
Mm-hmm.
and a world in which you wouldn't stand out. We didn't stand out. But I remember taking over. Gary Nicholson came over one time with me, and just because their stars of their world were as kind of weirdly authentic as the commercial world, which was just across the river. This time, East Nashville was mostly really, really low income, and over where the stadium is now is where there were used to be old honky tonks.
Wow.
And I remember going over there with some of the folks that I was writing at Welcome Music, and you know, so there was a community, and going over there and hearing people who probably came to Nashville when they were like 18 or 19, and they never got the deal. As you know, Nashville is all about, or has been in the past many times, all about the deal. You know, now everybody's got their own deal. So, hey.
Yeah.
So, you know, hanging out at those old honky tonks, Billy, you'd see would-be stars who had accepted their lot in life, but were just happy to come out and play for folks.
Oh yeah.
And they're playing for folks who might pay 75 cents to come into the place because they got no money. They make their money collecting beer cans and taking them out to the recycle center, but they still would have a bit of a social life.
Yeah.
And the one guy I used to see him with a shopping cart walking past Welcome Music up the alleyway over there, the Music Row. And I finally got up the nerve to just like talk to him, you know. I mean, because you know he's living in his own world, and I mean I'm definitely living in my own world, and yet here we are, and we all live. It's like Nashville's black community. How much? There's no interaction, you know, and there wasn't back in those days anyway. It was a segregated city. Well, I mean, not in the 80s, but way back in the 60s when I was there.
Right.
But so I used to see this guy, you know, in a kind of like secondhand clothes, you know, the kind of clothes a lot of people wear them now, made out of polyester fiber. They're just like really cheap, probably made in China, you know, and you know, but he had a certain bearing about him, like he had a purpose. And he was obviously one of those homeless people because I'd see him with his shopping cart going up the alley behind Welcome Music up to the recycle place. And when I asked him, he said, "Oh yeah," he says he collects beer cans during the day. That's how he makes his living. And he takes them to the recycle plant, and he says he has enough for a meal and some beer, and probably a lot of beer. But you know, I got to talking with him, and he said that where he camped out, and I'm not giving this away, folks. So I hope, because it's been a long time. But he camped out. He said under a heating vent in the winter in the RCA studio building. There's some bushes. There's like a hedge around the back where the the heating vent is. And he said that was how he managed to stay through the winter. I just couldn't believe it.
Oh man.
Talking with him, we talked a few times, and I remember he said this cool line to me, and I said, "Well, I thank you for telling me. I've been so curious where you where you live and stuff." He said, "Oh yeah," he told me about the Greyhound bus solution. He said, "Folks don't know about this." He said, "The Nashville government bought all the homeless people a one-way ticket to Memphis on Greyhound, and it became famous as the Greyhound bus solution. Is what it was called."
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, so what? Did they all stay over there?" He said, "No, Memphis isn't that good. We came back." So, and you know where they used to camp out? It was given to them by the government to camp out. Have you ever been out to the electric company where they have
Oh yeah.
the electric towers and the grid
Yeah.
on that big concrete platform? That used to be where they were allowed to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, out at the electric company. Anyway, his parting words to me before I wrote it up a little bit in a song called "Homeless and Hungry," which I think Ralph Stanley said he was going to, or maybe he did record it. I called it "We'll Work for Food," but Ralph knows how to title the song. "Homeless and Hungry." The opening lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the line was, he just looked at me with those eyes, those survivor's eyes. I mean, he was in good shape. He wasn't
Yeah.
sick. He just didn't want to live in the system. He said, "Remember, don't cheat the government. They don't like the competition."
Wow. Yeah, and I've done a little bit of the same, sort of the same thing, Peter. I've always been, if I see somebody that needs help and I'm in a position to help them, whatever, even if it's help them get a beer, hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Hell yeah, I got a couple dollars, man. Here you go. And
right
I
on.
get to talking to those people. Um, you know, one day I chased this person all the way, for a couple blocks. This girl was walking in the pouring rain with no shoes on, but she had these soaking wet socks and she was walking, and I'm just like, I went around the block to my house and I grabbed a couple clean pairs of socks and a couple pairs of shoes that I thought might fit her, and I
Yeah,
raced back over there, and
yeah,
I went and found her, and I said, "Hey, I got some, just take these shoes and clean socks for you, and she wouldn't take them. So I was like, "Damn it, what?" It kind of like it pissed me off in a way, but you can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. Anyways, there was these other guys sitting there drinking, and I said, "Hey, do you know that gal? She won't, I brought her some clean socks and shoes. Look, she's walking with no shoes in the rain, and she won't take my shoes." And these were other homeless guys. And
yeah.
so, one of those guys were like, "Give me them fucking shoes," and he's like, and
Yeah.
he walked up to her and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing? This boy's trying to give you some. Why don't you take these shoes?" And she just wouldn't have it. And then, and then he basically come back to me and was like, "Fuck her," you know. but
Yeah, yeah.
but
Well, that's part of the opioid syndrome, I think.
yeah,
People are strung out,
right, yeah,
you know.
it sucks. But I've talked to I've always been well giving, and also like sort of interested in that community and that lifestyle, and like you said, it's a totally different world, and
It's like a shadow world. It exists among us, but we don't, and they
yeah.
don't care. They don't necessarily want anybody who's not in that world to be have much to do with them at all.
There's a really good documentary you could watch if you have the time, Peter. It's called Dark Days, Days with a Z, and it's about all these homeless folks that live underneath the subway, like way down in the subways in New York City, and it's a really interesting documentary.
Is that a Netflix or
I'm not sure. It might be on there, but
Dark City? It's called. What's it
it's
called?
Dark Days.
I'm gonna write it down right now. Dark Days.
Yeah,
I
day.
mean, we. Yeah.
Days with a Z. So this one guy I was talking to, man, I got talking to him, and because at one point I wanted to, and I guess I still kind of do, like make a record, about this, with this kind of subject matter being the leading
Yeah.
uh, temper of the tunes, and then have the album proceeds benefit some kind of charity or some kind of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. So at one point I was actually going out and finding people to talk to, and I talked to this one guy who, like he had a perfect life, a nice house, and a good job and all this, a wife, a daughter, and he lost his little girl, and that tore his marriage apart. And after that, he just didn't want to be a part of everything either. Like you were saying, he
Right.
just sort of let go of the ideal, of like the idea of just having that sort of white picket, any kind of, uh,
Possessions. They
yeah,
just give up on. Yeah.
yep. And so it's like, man, I understand. I get it. Shit, that's tough, and
Hmm.
yeah. So it is interesting to hang with those folks, and I don't know. I love them, man. They're people, and they're getting by. They're some of the toughest people that are out there. A lot of them
Hmm.
are veterans.
Hmm. Well, there's supposed to be. I mean, the last number I heard mentioned on the radio on the news. Usually, I listen to KPFA out here, Pacifica, because they're very sort of liberal, and they bring up stuff that you never hear about. Um, but they've got their own approach to things. It's an original charter. They're not allowed to take money, so they have to ask their listeners to pay. It's listener supported. But the number, they gave a very high number for the homeless in this country. I want to say in the millions.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
Nashville used to have an active train uh, system connected to Kentucky and St. Louis, and one of the lines went down to Atlanta. And you know where that hotel called Union Station is right now?
I think so.
Well, down by the old railroad tracks, down sort of in Midtown. That was a railroad station, and of course, it's a commercial place. But actually, the old railroad station. Well, it's in general is between the post office and the Union Station Hotel, right along there. And I would usually go down and get my mail at night. Maybe 10:30, 11 at night. I finished doing whatever I was doing, heading home. And another night I went in there, not the same night that I found all the homeless people sleeping there. It was the only warm place they could find. Christmas Eve, man, it was amazing. But this was another time. It was in the spring, and I had seen this guy sitting out in a Cadillac out in front of this in the side parking lot. And the side parking lot had been there since the 20s or whenever they built the place. It wasn't built for like big box shopping parking lots are these days. It was very intimate. It was from there you walk up a beautiful set of steps up into this magnificent post office, which is now I think an art gallery. And but I kept seeing this guy, a real kind looking guy, sitting in this nice looking car. And so one night I approached him. I said, "Excuse me, sir. I noticed you here quite a lot." I said, I noticed there's a lot of folks around town who kind of are out and just out and about, and I've been talking to a few, and I just wanted to say hello to you." And he said, "That's all right." And I said, "What?" I said, "What? Do you mind telling me why you come here every night?" He said, "Well, you see, I worked for the railroad. This was my home base here. This is my station right here, next to the post office where Union Station Hotel was being the station was being remodeled into a hotel at the time. He says, I come here because this was where my life revolved around the Nashville train station. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He he started out he started out as a porter, and their early early integration was started by something called the Pullman Act, which it made it so the railroads had to employ black people as the porters because they were the poorest of the poor in the major cities, right? And so he said, I started out as a Pullman. He said, I started out,
Hmm.
helping people's bags, and I worked my way up, and I became a conductor. I said, really? Yeah. He said, this was over years. I became a conductor, and he said, I worked my way up. I became a fireman. He worked his way up.
Wow.
Actually became a fireman, shoveling the coal into those train engines. You know, he said, I even got to engineer a little bit, only in training. But he said
Wow.
that was the top dog position. But he said it was people who got to be engineers in those days. It was a high stress job. In fact, even right now, there are coal trains coming
Oh
out of
yeah.
the way up there in Michigan and places like that that are like 5 miles long, and they never get going very fast, but they are going. And can you imagine being in charge? You can't go fast in one of those things because you'd never be
Right.
able to stop it. And so, and he told me, and I
Right.
said, well, do you live here in town? He says, yes, sir, I do. He says, I just come out in the evenings because this is where I can set my mind free and just and I think I dream a little bit. He had been in the railroads, and
Yeah.
I find that is a vibe in Nashville. It's a town of dreamers, especially people who've come with nothing. They've settled for a dream of their dream in a way. Uh, and then you've got everybody else, on the higher levels
Yeah.
of I don't know what the story is with the record companies anymore. I mean, I don't even know if record companies are in business at this point, but I hope they are. I mean, you got back in the '80s, you had the executives and you had the people running these publishing companies and everything like that, and that was still part of the old school of Nashville. Of course, now since that time, everybody's become their own record company and their own publisher, which was weirdly enough what we were going like. Yeah, we should become our own publishers and our own record companies. But my business manager at the time said to me, he said, "Do you want how many boxes of records do you want to have in your living room or garage?" I was like, yeah, okay. Let the pros take care of that.
Oh man. That's funny because I'm sitting in my living room right now and I've literally had it full of
All ready
boxes
to
of
go.
merch and records and stuff like that
Well,
to the
are you on your own
to the
label?
ceiling. Yeah. Well, I mean, this last record that we put out on Rounder.
Oh yeah. Okay. So they're printing it for you. That's good.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, we do all our own merch and all that stuff and,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff and
Well, you got a great band, man. Do you still got the same guys?
yeah, I'm saying Billy Failing and Royal Massat and Jared Walker. It's gosh, I miss them dudes. We were so like close, and we're together every day, and we're living in the bus or in the van or wherever we
Y-
are on tour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's like I haven't seen any of them in like weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's like
Where are they
shit.
living? Are they in town?
Well, Jared's in town, and Royal is in town as well.
Oh yeah.
So I could go, pick with Jared and stuff, but I just haven't really seen anybody. I've been home, this whole time only to like, the parts store and Home Depot and shit once or twice. Um,
Yeah. Hardware store. It's
Yeah.
been my hardware store and then the bakery. Oh, that's very
Yes.
dangerous.
Yeah. Well, man, those guys are awesome. I'm getting to the point where I think it's probably cool if I go pick some tunes with Jared. I mean, we can stay 6 feet apart and stuff. And I'm getting to the point where I need to play some music with somebody else.
I
It's
know what you mean. I've been working on all these songs, and I actually been writing a lot of stuff on the Telecaster.
oh
Uh,
cool.
with the, I mean, sustain in bluegrass is, what I mean. It's kind of bound by the form, and when you say if you appreciate if you like what I play on guitar, I mean, basically, I like to leave space, and I just all I can really do is work on tone, But when I was in Nashville, of course, working with Mark O'Connor and Jerry Douglas, it was like, yeah, baby, better step up. But yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
we got you back now. I'm powered up with my computer.
good deal, man. What happened?
I don't know. We lost power.
Isn't that crazy?
I have no idea. So, I don't know if I know that our bill's all up to date and stuff. I wonder if they're working on something around the corner and snip the wrong wire or something.
Well, it could be because you're talking to me. I have an adverse effect of machinery.
Oh man. Well, when we got cut off, I was telling you about how much I was missing my band and uh
Mm.
just talking about playing with other people and how that's, we're kind of missing that, but
Yeah, it's nice to know that it is an actual possibility. Uncertain when, but it's great. We have that to look forward to.
yeah.
I mean, it's a phenomenon, right? Because we haven't done it, so it's like, wow, check this out.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, the first concerts when we come back, they're just going to be unreal. The energy and,
Oh
it's
yeah.
gonna,
Are you you've got dates in September or October?
yeah, I mean, I think we've even got dates in August that are still on our calendar, but who knows if we'll actually play them.
Yeah, no, I've got some dates in August too. A little weekend thing. I don't know though. Well, we'll see. They'll be the next to go, I guess, because July just went.
Have you ever, I mean, you've been doing this a long time, Peter. And have you ever had anything like this before where you've had, been forced to take a long break like this?
No, I mean, in the late '60s, when Dave Grisman and I had Earth Opera, we the end of the band was a cross country tour. We had done two. We had been to Canada, opened for the Doors around New England, New York, and Canada, and we had one tour to Florida, which was like no dates until we got to Florida. I mean, you'd think there could have been just something, but I mean, I think we played maybe one place in Georgia on the way down. Uh, but it was a thrill, you know what I mean? It was like we're going to go do it, and we did it. And we were down in Florida for a couple of weeks. That was all right. We survived that one. Although I had an a coat from Afghanistan made of goat skin with the fur side in. This was a sort of a thing back then when people used to travel, bring back Afghani hash, and they'd bring back a few other baubles and things. And when you get down to Florida, it was all over 80 degrees, right? And this coat, I think it had been cured with camel piss or something because, man, it was like, what is that? Did somebody leave some food in the car? Did somebody leave some food in the van? It's like, oh my God. I had to like carefully put it somewhere else, like not in the van. And that was the end of that thing. you
Oh
know,
man, well, I'm sure it was, when you're young, you will sacrifice so many things for style, right?
anything.
I mean, yeah, you walk around smelling like a corpse because, man, that coat was probably cool as hell.
It was a cool code, but I mean, people were reacting in a very strange way. It's the same way. It's the same thing that happened when I was with Bill Monroe, and we went down through Nogales, Arizona, to play some date on the way to somewhere to the West Coast, I guess. And we stopped on the border, and Bill said it was okay for me and Jimmy and Lamar to go over to the. Richard stayed in L.A. He was going to fly out and meet us in Nashville. He wasn't going to ride back with us, and so Bill stayed on the bus, maybe with Virginia Stauffer at the time. And he said, "You boys just have a good time. I'll be back soon after dark. Don't stay down there too long." So we went over the border at Nogales, and I bought what I thought was a cool sandals, man. You know, it was the 60s, and sandals were like, wow. You know, these are the Mexican kinds that were made with a tire tread on the bottom. And but they, they fit all right. And they were like, oh, it's just cool. I got sandals, man. I never had sandals before. And I bought a pair of cowboy boots, all for nothing. I mean, just cheap, 5, $10, $15. I think I paid for the boots. Well, we went over there, and Lamar, Jimmy, and I, we stayed, and we've got our stuff. We're walking around, and somebody comes up to us and says, "Do we want to go to the donkey show?" And it's like, the donkey show. We've heard these rumors, we've heard stories of these, the over the border, sexcapades of bizarreness. And we said, okay, and it was like, all right. So this guy took us through these alleyways and back into this thing, and we walked through this place that was surrounded by barbed wire and had cages of German shepherds barking their heads off. I mean, not a good sign. And so we went up into this room, and we're sitting there like idiots in these chairs in a bedroom. And it's, you know what black light is?
Yeah.
It's a kind of paint job where it shows up under a black light, which it looks sort of neonish. Anyway, it looks weird as heck, And
Mm-hmm.
we were sitting there, and we just kind of looking at each other like, well, I guess we're going to do it, huh? We paid our money, or $5. And so these two girls come in, and well, nothing happened. They were dressed in sort of underwear, but they were just normal women who probably got hired just to do this thing. They said, okay, and then the guy left, and we're left there with the girls, and the girls go, okay, this is. They went through these different faking, like these little postures, Here's doggy style, and so one girl would get behind the other girl, and they would just sort of like model it, It's like, and then these were not really, these were not your supermodels, and when it got to the donkey, we're going, oh yeah, okay, well, the donkey show was one girl pretended she was the donkey, and the other girl pretended, but there was nothing happening. It was all it was like posing. It was like a pose, donkey like this, and then we wanted to leave, and they wanted more money. And so the guy came in, and we had to like bribe him to let us out of there. Oh, the Bluegrass boys, we were so sophisticated. And then we get back to the bus, and in the morning I showed Bill these boots I'd bought. I was so proud of them, man. And he said, "Well, they'll be all right if they last a week." And I thought, well, that's a mean thing to say. Well, sure enough, after 1 week, the heels came off, both of them. And it was like, and I said, "Man, you were right." And he said, "Well, they're probably made from a donkey, It was so bizarre. Yeah.
Oh man.
We were spared. We were spared. And we
Well.
drove through Elgin, Texas, and the clock in Elgin, Texas had exactly the same time as when we drove west. We went through town. In the town square, there's a big clock on the tower of the courthouse, and it said 11:30. And it was probably 2 in the afternoon. And we drove by, and it was like, well, okay. And on the way back, we drove through Elgin, Texas, and the clock said exactly 11:30.
Wow.
Mm.
Man, that's wild. Those
Long
must have
hours on
been.
the bus in those days. Sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, no, I was just, thinking, God, being on the road with Bill Monroe must have been a trip.
Yeah, I mean, he was the master. He somewhere I wrote. My imagination is always like going a little haywire, and so I mean, I was like at one point when Bill was being seemed to be like autocratic. I was writing in my diary that it was like Captain Ahab, and we were in the belly of the great white whale, sort of mixing up, Jonah and the whale and Moby Dick. But other times, he was quite funny. It's just that, you think about the leeway he had to have to be at that time. He's 55 years old, and he had already been had bands since he was in his 20s. And I think how old was he? 28 when he hit the Grand Ole Opry as a solo artist. There's a
Yeah.
picture of him in the Bear Family book of Charlie Monroe's, uh, the Charlie Monroe collection, and it has a picture of Bill and their cousins all playing music. And you look, and who's this guy with the hair hanging down to his shoulders? It's Bill Monroe.
Oh, wow.
He was the original.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
because I remember I asked him one time. I said, "Bill, why do you want us to have these short haircuts and everything?" He said, "Well, Pete, when I started out, some of these boys they'd have their hair hanging down on one side, past their ears. He said it just doesn't look right for the people." And I finally saw this picture only a few years ago, and I went, "Oh, I get it. It was you. It was him who had the hair."
Yep, man.
No, he was there was a way to sort of a routine, but I took advantage of it in that when you drove the bus, you had to do a couple of 3 hours, maybe longer even, just driving. And then Bill would always be sitting up close to the driver's seat, sort of shotgun,
Hmm.
and he wouldn't talk to you while you were driving. But
Hmm.
his presence was very focused. He had been many a mile.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, by any standards, we boys should, by child labor law, we should not have been driving that bus, but but we did. Um, and I remember that, it was after like 1 in the morning or something. Lamar was going to take my place, and the way you did it was you get to the top of a hill and you'd throw that bus into neutral so that the engine wouldn't have any drag to it at all, just for the moment at the top of the hill before you go over the top. You the driver steps out of the seat and the next driver climbs in over his legs and sits and then throws it into like fourth or fifth gear because you're going to be going downhill.
Hmm.
But and you had to double clutch. You had to like gas it twice and put the clutch in twice so that the complicated gear system was all caught up with itself.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and if you were lucky, you wouldn't hear this grinding sound. But and you get it was quite a sense of satisfaction if you're the new driver. You jump in to the seat while the other guy slides out. You rev it up twice, and then hopefully slam it into. Depends how fast you're going, but you at the top of a hill going about 45 miles an hour, you could pretty much get it into gear without too much trouble doing the double clutching thing. Of course, then you're going downhill in gear, which is good because you need the bus gears have to brake the bus. The the
Right.
the brakes would never ever stop that machine. It would be just too heavy. I mean, I remember you could pump forever, and the bus would, if you weren't in gear, you'd be in trouble. So you had to know how to like downshift into third, even going down a hill, and kind of like let the engine break the speed of the bus.
Yep.
So I climbed out of my seat. It's about 1 in the morning, and I didn't hear. And Bill, he'd been back a little bit in the cab playing his mandolin. And whenever Bill played his mandolin, everybody just kind of listened and stuff like that, but never occasionally, if it was during the day, we might pick with him a little bit. But it would seem to be his private time at night. He'd be playing these like fantasies on the mandolin. He'd be playing like a blues, and then and he knew we were listening. And if he knew you were listening to him, he'd kind of like get far out. He'd go, like you know take it someplace like really interesting, right? He'd like do the double string thing. He'd press down only one of the two
Oh
strings
yeah.
and get a harmony, and he had all this stuff that he did, but he never made it part of an act. But because I think the focus of bluegrass is so fine that the gem-like quality of what he left in it shines even brighter. I mean, he said, Pete, I've had to keep as much out of my music as I put in it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. So I sat down there and I started listening to him play, and it's like, it was sort of like Bill's private space. He just sort of like always left it alone. But I, being young and brash, and I looked at those opportunities as like that's where the magic was being displayed. And what I mean, all these things like the ancient tones that all came out of those moments. So like some might say, what do you call that? He said, well, that's just part of the ancient tones right there. Or
Mhm.
or he says that's a blues, and then he played a little something. He go, that's the Indian sound. He meant the American Indians. He said that's an Indian sound. And
Mhm.
I've seen the pictures of his mother. She has very distinctive Cherokee features in the picture that I saw.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he learned mandolin I mean, that was her instrument. So he learned mandolin, and that probably singing in those higher ranges from her, from his mother's singing. It was a real musical family. Anyway, I'm sitting there listening to him do this stuff, and he goes, "Oh, that's the Indian sound there." So he knew, but he also knew he had a listener, right? He could have said that to somebody from another part of his world, and they would have gone, you know. But I'm like, oh my God, yes. There's like like all these threads, right? It's so exciting.
Mhm.
Uh, and so he started playing this kind of like a bluesy kind of thing I'd never heard before. And and I said, wow, that's beautiful. Where did you first hear the blues? And he didn't say from Arnold Schultz or anything like that. He said when Lester and Earl joined the band, they were green. He said they were green, and I had to
Mhm.
take them someplace where we could work on the music and have in the music what I wanted. And I said, oh yeah. And he said, so they went to New Orleans.
Hmm.
They went and lived in New Orleans. He said, in my diary it says for 2 months. So this is what he must have said. Uh, they lived for 2 months down there and built. Well, of course, I said, what kind of music did you hear down there? And he go, well, a man could find any kind of music he wanted to find. I'm thinking, yeah, okay. And but basically, he just took these boys from Tennessee, Lester and Earl, and gave them the education of whatever that meant down there in New Orleans at the time. But it certainly meant a lot about music, because if you listen to Bill's stomps and and blues stomps, pretty much, like Brakeman's blues and all that stuff.
Mhm.
A fellow named Greg Garing and I sat down one day, and Greg played Bill's mandolin parts on the right hand of the piano, and they are actually what you would have heard a barrel house piano player playing if
Wow.
you a stomp like that. You
Yeah.
know, it just that right hand stuff. It is exactly what Bill was playing. So he was definitely picking up on what the piano players were doing. And I said, well, was there? a lot of music. I wasn't going to let him get away with telling me a man could find anything. That was just, it was like, oh, okay. And I said, so, what kind of like blues? And he gave me the names of them. He said you had sock time, which I think is sort of like I don't know. It must be what Brakeman's blues is, sock time, I would say. And then he said you had jump time, which just must mean you jump in the time you're playing, like just breakneck, pushing the beat, maybe. I don't know. And he said you had a good waltz. Everyone played a good waltz. And he said, and then he blew my mind. He said, and of course you had the slow drag. The slow drag, man. What is the slow drag? And he basically, I think he incorporated all that stuff into his style, but did it within the format that he wanted, which was, based out of old time music. I mean, the blues are in there, but he didn't go like, and in fact, in New Orleans at the time, a slow drag would have been, like a, like a da 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 da, which was what he would play like on Sitting on Top of the World. But it would be played fast, but it was a slow drag tune.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think the connection wouldn't have been obvious at all. But when I think of what a slow drag tune would be, I think of In the Pines.
Right.
But Bill was always about kind of keeping danceable, basically.
Yeah.
And I think in New Orleans you probably had a lot of variations on what a slow drag could really be. And I know it was one of the mournful tunes they played going to the cemetery, like da, 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 da. And they play the same. They didn't he ramble? And then they'd play the same tune coming back up tempo. So Bill was an explorer. I think he was one of us. He was out there trying to. I mean, we're one of him.
Yeah, yeah.
We received something from him, and it's important to know what it was, or what it
Right.
is, because we're playing basically under his, you know, musical legacy. He's the lineage holder. If you look at it like a spiritual tradition, the lineages are made up of various contributors to the mainstream of the teachings.
Right.
And you'd have like, even you'd have Bill, and you'd have Lester and Earl, you have Carter and Ralph and Jim and Jesse, and they all are in there. But I think, but the endless fascination with Bill Monroe is what he knew and what he interpreted, or what people have interpreted of what he knew. Because you've heard people play bluegrass, and it's just so stiff. It doesn't have any sense of the underlying time. Like
Yeah.
like a 3/4 tune having a 6/8 feel underneath it, that kind of thing. Um, I think that's important, and I think musically that is a great untapped future of what we can do in bluegrass. Um, and yet, it pretty much we still play between the lines. As playing bluegrass, we do.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that could happen. It's just that it's how to communicate that. Like you could have all kinds of sub rhythms breaking down. I always thought that the bass, instead of playing 2/4, could be playing something much broader, because the bass has a lot of sustain. The old bluegrass basses didn't have any sustain at all. They just
Right.
thunk. But the modern players that began with Mark Schatz, they got a lot of sustain, and so, but it still comes down to being hard driving. I mean, that's sort of the hallmark. But I once had a woman drive me down in Missouri, out to a festival. No, out to the parking lot from the airport. She's a beautiful black woman, and she had a briefcase under her seat. And she told me that she was a writer, and she was just doing this to earn money at night, taking the shuttle, taking people out to the rent-a-car parking lot. And I said, "Well, that's so fantastic." I said, "What are you writing about?" She says, "About women today and how it is for us." I said, "In the black community?" He said, "No, women in general." She was serious. And she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I play bluegrass." And she goes, "Bluegrass? That's the most uplifting music in the world."
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I think it's kept me out of a lot of trouble. And gotten me into some trouble too, but hey.
Oh, well, every door is open at some point.
Oh, man. Well, it's great to talk to you, Peter, and I really appreciate you taking the time to, tell some of these stories, and look forward to playing some music with you again at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, we got to make this record, man. We got to do it.
Yep.
I've still got the framework. Maybe I'll even, now I've gotten into a little bit of home recording. I got a little mic that fits on my laptop and everything. Maybe I'll get the tunes together so that I can sort of demo them up, and then we can go ahead and proceed.
Yeah, man. I don't know when you'll be able to come to Nashville or whatever, but whenever the chains are lifted, let's make some music and sing some songs together. And you are very appreciated, Peter. We're all grateful, and you're a treasure to us all, man.
Hey, buddy. Lots of love to you and all the gang, and it's great to connect. I look forward to our next get together.
All right, man. Well, stay safe, play safe, and keep your stick on the ice. Don't let your meat loaf.
Where did you get to keep the stick on the ice? Where did you get that?
There's a guy named Mark Haney way up in Michigan. He always used to say that.
Well, it's funny, but it's, as you're going on stage, people say a lot of things. Like don't leave the good notes in the dressing room and all that kind of stuff. But people from the North, and I've heard it a couple of times, and I've said it myself, as you're all departing the dress, see you out on the ice. It's hockey, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you lived up in that weather, man, you know what that means.
Yeah. Man,
Billy. Yeah, go ahead.
There was this one time I broke 3 strings during a set. And I broke 2, and when I broke the 3rd one, everybody threw their hats on stage.
Hey.
It was a hat trick.
You did the hat trick, man. How cool is that?
I was pissed.
Hey, I know.
All right, Peter. Take care, man.
All right, brother. I'll see you out in the ice.
All right.
Later.
Bye.
Well, that one had it all, folks. Power outages, donkey shows, Bill Monroe, and even a little bit of picnic. Great big thank you to Peter for picking up today. We appreciate his willingness to share all kinds of tales with us, especially the ones about the father of bluegrass himself. Just a quick edit. The documentary that Billy mentioned to Peter is Dark Days with an S and not a Z. Tune in next time when Billy gets on the line with T. Michael Coleman. That name should ring a bell for most of you, but if it doesn't, look him up. T. Michael is a bluegrass-based legend, and over the years he's held down the low end for many artists, including our beloved Doc Watson. Looking forward to hearing that one myself. For now, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. We'll be back real soon. Bye now.
I'd love to show you, but you wouldn't go.